Hello, welcome back. We're going to talk about Bargue drawing. I've got a example loaded up back here in Photoshop, but the article is pretty self-explanatory. If you guys have any questions about what on earth we are doing this for, then I can answer those things. But the process is basically to figure out how to fit a figure perfectly within a sort of envelope and then carefully measure all of the different dimensions so that you get as accurate a representation of them as possible. But we're thinking two-dimensionally, right? So in the past we were drawing cylinders and spheres and cubes in preparation for free life drawing and building anatomy. This doesn't have to do with that. This is a separate, different kind of thing. Sometimes you guys have been struggling with how large certain parts of the body are, how far apart they are, the angles, that sort of thing. This is to help with that. By doing this and carefully measuring all the positions on the page, it gives you a very, very fine-grained look at exactly where everything is. And when traced out properly, you can get down to the smallest detail a perfect photographic representation of anything you want, as long as you're very, very picky about how you do it. We're not going to go that far. We're only going as far as this final one on the right over here, where I've got the outline in what are essentially straight lines. I don't know if you guys can see that very clearly, but I'm not curving these lines. I'm not making S curves. I'm not making C curves. I'm just drawing from point to point to point to point, and if the points get closer together, then we get more detail, and if the points are farther apart, we get less detail. Okay, so no part of this should be round, even though it might appear to be round because it gets so small. And I'm just laying in all of the visible parts of the body and not caring about the parts that fall away into shadow. So for instance, this guy that I picked, I thought was interesting because he's got a strong light source on the left-hand side, also conveniently censored for YouTube. Convenient. Okay, and it means that we can't see half his face. And a lot of the details over here on the shadow side of his body, including this entire arm, doesn't have any internal detail, which is great for an example. It means that we can basically just trace him out like a paper doll and then fill in a few extra details in the middle and we're done. Okay, I went so far as to trace out the shadows that I thought the shapes made on his body. You don't have to even quite go that far if you don't want to. A few interior shapes and a nice detailed exterior shape is good enough for me. Okay, but because we're working two-dimensionally, it might be difficult to decide what is and is not something that you should put into this drawing. But if you think about it just in terms of light and dark, or even, as I'll show you in a minute, use some adjustment layers to force this to be a more strict outline, then it will be a little bit easier to execute. Okay? Did you guys read the article? Do you have any questions? Is there any ambiguity there? And be aware that there's a nice explanation right here as well. Let's go and look at that real fast. Because I did get a question beforehand. I forget who asked it, but they were saying they draw with paper and pencil. And can they do that here? And it's like, yes, you can. Just tape it up, just like that. Do make sure that you print it out at an appropriate size to draw. But since it has to be side by side because we're going to use these careful measured lines, then just tape it to the left-hand side or the right-hand side, whichever handedness you are, and draw right next to it, just like this person has done in their example. And their explanation right here is spot on. This is almost exactly what you want to do. Is you can take a piece of string or a pencil or a stick or anything and measure how far something is from your center line, your top line, and eventually from your own carefully drawn lines, and then reproduce it on the right-hand side. In digital, we have the benefit of taking and transposing some step. Like you can see, I've got actual guidelines drawn over the guy. And we can take and transpose those guidelines back and forth so that we can use them as pretty reasonable means to estimate as well. But you shouldn't just be drawing over the guy and then putting it over here. That would defeat the purpose. The purpose is to try to reconstruct the figure next to the original using accurate measurements. Okay? And those accurate measurements will become the basis of a sort of intuitive feeling for measurement that you can build as you draw more and more. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for being my audience member.
Gotcha.
These are some of the examples I thought were pretty good. This first one basically just showing how we've got not just the top, bottom, left, right, and almost always it's essential to choose a middle line too. Where you put that is up to you. It doesn't have to be in the mathematic middle, but this person chose to put it right along this seam line created by the spinae muscles, the erector spinae, or between the scapula, and that makes a lot of sense. If it coincides with other anatomical features, great. If it doesn't matter. Okay. In my example, I think I chose the crook of his neck right here just because it was a really reliable spot to put something. And I also saw that his hip changed direction right at that point. The nipple did, the head seemed to. It just kind of made sense. Oh, and it lined up with the heel as well. So where you put that specifically, it could be on like the left side of his face or the center, or I don't know, wherever you think is going to be helpful. We're measuring from that point outward to get our initial points. Okay. Let's look at the other examples. So this first one makes a lot of sense. So we're seeing this basic envelope. It should look very primitive, maybe not even entirely like the figure at first. And then as you chisel into it, it'll look more and more like the figure that you intend. And eventually you just go down to the point where you can't tell the difference between a drawing and these little straight lines. Okay. I like this one because it shows the one on the left would be a finished product for you guys. Okay. The one on the right being the original, this one has everything I could ask for. Okay. It's all proportional, nicely laid out, still made out of straight lines for the most part, even though there appear to be a couple curves in here. And they've even traced out the shadow shapes. So up, over, up, back down. And it's nice and clear because of the cast print. One of the reasons that we'll use casts or photographs is because they're very easy to find the light and dark shapes. And photographic people, it's much harder to figure that out. This is one that I did some years ago. I couldn't find the process steps. I had saved them on different layers just so I could show them, but I couldn't find it. But on the left is the original, on the right is my recreation, and I was trying to go for perfect representation, not just the drawn straight lines. So you can go that far if you want to.
I have a question.
Yes.
Does all artists use this guideline all the time?
No, absolutely not. This is just for perfect shape and proportion recreation. This is not a standard artistic practice at all, right? Because most of the time, you're not copying something verbatim. You're creating something new, or you're interpreting it. And through your interpretation, if you were to draw freely, gesture drawing leading to full figure drawing, it's not going to look like the original, and it shouldn't. It's going to look like your slightly stylized interpretation of what the person was doing, right? So this is just similar to gridding, which is another way to get a fairly accurate representation. The difference between this and gridding is that it's relying more on you making fundamental steps and then moving on through your own steps towards completion rather than constantly going back to a mathematical grid over and over and over. That process is similar to what you'll do in full figure drawing to get accuracy and then start to move away from that accuracy towards interpretation. Hopefully that explanation made any sense at all.
It makes perfect sense.
Cool. All right, let's take a look at this then. I'm going to show you how I would set up this file. In fact, why don't I just make a brand new file right away, and I'll even bring in the object. So I've got a set size for my basic canvas. You could just open the original file and then make it twice as wide. That's one way to go. Or you can start with a set canvas size that you like and drag the file in and see how big it is. It doesn't really matter if it gets pixelated or not because you're just looking for basic shapes anyway. I'm going to drag the file straight in here. Just drop it. There he is. You can see he gets a layer of his own, and I'm going to place him on the left side here. Here we go. I'm also going to create a new layer. So this will be my first layer, probably guidelines.
So, I'm sorry. We do this in Photoshop?
You do this in Krita, Photoshop, any digital art program, or if you're going to do it with paper, you tape it up next to your paper.
Okay.
Which one are you using?
I usually use Procreate, but I could use Photoshop on my iPad, I think.
Does Procreate give you the ability to draw careful straight lines and put a picture in first?
You could do straight lines, and you can export images in there, import images.
So you can put like a reference picture in, slide it over to the side, and then draw over the top?
Yes.
That's all you need.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, I like Photoshop because of the convenience of being able to do like this whenever I want to. So I can do more careful measurements, or also what I'm about to show is use an adjustment layer to increase the contrast in this image to make it easier to see where the light and dark shapes might be. So for that reason, I like Photoshop quite a bit, but I could just as easily be doing this in Krita or whatever program, really. Okay. All right. So let me show you what I might do for this. It would be pretty easy to set up our first few steps and make our guidelines, but just before I get into that, if I use a adjustment layer down here, we've got a few options. I oftentimes go for curves because there's a lot of customization, but let's just try exposure and see if that works. If I turn the exposure up, there we go. As long as that background isn't interfering too much, this starts to give a much clearer idea of what shapes we would actually trace out. There's still a lot of gray in here. Let's see if I can, there we go, make it go even further. Just a little bit like that. So some of the details are now gone, but you can see like this big triangular shape on his cheek where before that kind of faded into the background, and also this like almost square shape coming up his head and then down the other side of his forehead. Those would be considered, I guess, light shapes really if I look at everything, but I could turn them into dark shapes if I want to. But now the shape of the nose, right, going across here and down into a shadow and across and up, that's a lot clearer. The underside of the jaw is a lot clearer, and it could help me make my decisions. Also, the benefit for Photoshop is I can just turn it off and look at it normally again. Okay, so first be thinking about the exterior shape, just like I did in the example. Then any interior shapes you know you need. You know you're going to need something for the eye and eyebrow. You know you would need something for the under of the nose, probably something for the lips and beard. After that, it gets a little bit shaky. I think his neck makes a big shape all its own that is differentiated by the beard line and the neckerchief. And once we get down to the neckerchief, there's probably too many to keep track of, but I turn this on and I start to be able to see a lot clearer what's what. And I could also mask things out if I wanted to, so that I'm not dealing with that background anymore. Let's turn that off. All right. If you are using traditional tools, be sure that you have a ruler. You're going to need a ruler or a straight edge, because if you don't have that, then drawing your first guideline straight across might go like this, and then you're going to be drawing much larger than the original figure. Okay, so usually a T-square is something that is often used in drafting classrooms. You don't need a T-square, but you should measure, and let me get a brighter color so we can see. You should measure the total vertical size of this. I'm going to make a thicker line so you guys can see. You should measure the total vertical size of this if you've got a ruler, and make sure that when you draw over here that it's the same total vertical size. That's how you would make sure that you have a straight line. You could also do that from the edge of your paper if you don't have such a large instrument. Draw your initial guideline across, and then check that this distance and this distance are the same. If they are, you've got a straight line. If they're not, adjust it until you have a straight line. Okay? Those can be some of the ways that you can get started. So I'll do my initial lines here in red. Another benefit of Photoshop is that if I did a whole bunch of lines in red, I could use blending modes or whatever to turn it into black or gray lines, but it doesn't really matter. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to be using just Shift. Okay, so in Photoshop, if you use Shift and you just draw a line, it gives you a straight line. See how my cursor's way over to the left? This is locked to a straight line. But I could be using this line tool also. That will give me perfectly straight lines. And once I let go, it actually draws it. at whatever weight I specify. And if I hold shift again, it will lock it to vertical and horizontal angles. This would be the same as using like a protractor and a ruler or something with traditional drawing. And since this is for such an analytic kind of approach, it's perfectly fine to do that. I'm also going to zoom in just a bit so we can fill the screen with him. So I'll just go ahead and use shift though. Just know that when you, in Photoshop, hold down the shift key and then click and drag, whatever the direction you first move in is the direction the line is locked to. So if you accidentally go in the wrong direction, right, then you're going to get a line that you don't want and you'll have to undo. The one other danger is that if you've already clicked somewhere, you hold shift and you clicked again, sometimes you get a straight line like this between the 2 points if you have a pressure sensitive tool. To fill that in, you can either just shift click, click, click back and forth a few times and it'll darken, or have a tool that doesn't have pressure sensitivity turned on. And either one of those approaches will give you nice clean straight lines the first time. Alright, so with our whole figure, the first couple steps were find the very tippy top point and make a horizontal line across the entire drawing space like that. So that would be the top of his hair up there. Down here it would be the bottom of his scarf, just like that. And then I want to pick a center line somewhere. Okay, so I could pick like the edge of his eye right here, might make sense, or along the ear or his sideburn or something like that. I'm going to pick this point on the eye and just hope that it lines up with something. Let's see. So it doesn't quite hit the scarf down here. Maybe I've gone, you know what, if I scoot it over to right where this this little point where the tear lines start to diverge, it may hit the scarf. So let's try that. Oh, that's perfect. There we go. Okay, so that's going to be my center line then. Okay. So now that we've got that, I'm also going to draw a vertical line for the far left-hand side of the figure and the far right-hand side, which I'm going to guess is this eyebrow. Yeah, just about that eyebrow. Okay, something like that. So this is the total space that our drawing will fit in. Over here on the right, I can see I'm going to want to put my center line slightly on the right-hand side of my drawing area to start off with, so I have enough room. So I'm just going to arbitrarily put my center line in here. And then this is how we first start using our measurement. I need to find this distance exactly. That one. Not anything different than that. Exactly that one. So I could do this a number of different ways. I could estimate and then check my figure, or I could use like a selection tool like this. So if I grab this just like that, I can actually hold both Alt and Control and drag it over. I could even snap it to, you know, being vertical if I hold Shift as well, but we're getting into a lot of technology there. And I could just set it aside like this. This would be sort of like measuring visually with a tool, something like that. I could have a whole layer set aside for drawing a guideline, moving the whole layer, and then drawing in my new line, but that would get pretty tedious. Let me show you what I mean by that. So if I made a new layer and then draw this line and then move the entire layer over, so it's saying right there, that's where it is. So I'll go back to my original one and draw in that side of that box, and then over on this layer I can just erase this little guideline that I made. Then I can make a new one over here, just like that. Move the layer, line it up, go back to my original layer, draw my guideline. So the reason I might not do that is because it's a little tedious to switch back and forth, back and forth, back and forth over and over again. I would rather just use a selection tool or something and try to get my accurate measurements that way. But however you do it, you're looking to measure distance and then put in a guideline over and over and over again. That's what's going to make the figure work. You guys all with me so far?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Quick question.
Yo!
Did you want to see all of those lines drawn, or can we use rulers in Photoshop?
Let's see, how much did I leave in my last one? I left at least the bounding box in, which I think, yeah, leave the bounding box in. I don't care how many of these extra lines are in here, but I do want to see some of the steps that you follow. Okay, so if you want to deliver a final result only, That's good. Give me one more that shows like halfway through or just some guidelines or something, so I can verify that you're doing the process correctly. But really, if you turn in the homework and it's just 2 finished products and they look good, you'll get all the points. It'll be fine. Okay. But if something goes wrong in your homework and you don't know, I'm not going to be able to help you as well if I don't see those process drawings. So I'm going to erase out just a little bit to remind myself that this is not drawing area in between these two, because I don't want to accidentally think that I'm in the wrong rectangle here. But that would be step 1, done. In my process, what I'll do is start a new layer for step 2, and then fade the previous step a little bit. I do that just so that I've got it kind of saved for myself in case I need to start over or something goes very wrong. And also I can turn these on progressively as I go. But obviously if you're using pencil, you can't do that. Just make sure pretty much throughout the whole course of the drawing that your guidelines are light but visible. So never darken them in so much that they're going to be a part of your final drawing, but keep them light but visible the whole time. Okay? So that would have been step 1. Step 2, we want to find the position of all the most important parts that shape this head. And I mean in the vaguest possible way. So I'll go ahead and switch my color. Let's do a blue for this. All right, there. And I kind of want to think a little abstractly, like, what's the most basic shape that could represent this? I think it's something like this. Something like that, probably. Okay. Not all of these points have to touch something important, but they should either start or end somewhere touching the outside lines or bounding them in with a flat line, like either one of those things. So those of you that have a ruler, like in reality, this is going to be helpful because you can just line that ruler right up against something. For Photoshop users, this is where you may want to use the line segment tool instead, because it's just going to be easier. I'm going to turn up the weight to like 5 or something. Let's see. Yeah, that'll be fine. All right, so with this line tool, so I'm going to come down here and try to guess where can I get a nice straight line from here down to there. So you can see I started far too high up there. Let's just try again. Right there. So that's actually going to be more correct for this, because it's just skirting the side of this scarf and touching that. And so I'll go ahead and erase out the one that I didn't want. Okay, along the bottom, just straight, and pretty much got to go all the way over to here because I'm not going to cut up this section yet. I'm just going to go straight up to somewhere near the eyebrow point. A little beyond, because I'm going to have to come up along his hairline. So then I'm going to try to draw a line that just touches both his scalp and his hair. You can see I started too far to the left. So let's start a little higher, right about there. Yeah, I just missed his skull, but that's going to be okay. And then I'll erase out the line that I don't want. Maybe darken in the one that I do. Then I'm going to go across the top. And somewhere here I'm going to be able to just hit these peaks on the back of his hair. Up again, started a little bit too low. That's acceptable. I cut off a little bit, but that's okay. And then we'll come down there. Okay? So that's our kind of bounding box now, that sort of shape. Now I did all of that directly on the figure, didn't I? Okay? So we got to do that over here in the empty space. So how we do that is we have to transpose those points. Now, these ones are going to be easy, right? Right there. Okay? Horizontal, right there. Those are going to be our connect the dot points. Okay? But this is going to get more and more dependent on your previous measurements every time we do it. Okay? So obviously, I'm going to want to erase all this stuff over this figure, but maybe I don't. Maybe these lines that I just drew are going to be useful reference points. Okay? So consider, though, that I can't just go over for this one. I need to find that position. I need to move that over. So that's where I might use a second layer, or I might use a selection tool. So let's go ahead and do this. I'll go right to here. Grab that, copy it over. Now I've got this point. Okay. Notice I'm just making X's right now. I'm going to actually fill in this side on a different layer so I can independently turn its opacity down. This one also, draw a nice flat ruler line to here, and since it's on the edge, there we go. The one on the bottom, we can't do that, so I need to copy this bottom line. Just like that. Okay. Or I could have actually used my center line. If you see right down here, let's go down there. This point where it intersects is just to the right of my center red line. So this one is one where I could have taken a guess and then used my guess to see how close I got. So let me just erase that out a little bit. Taking a look at the spacing here and over here, I could say it's probably right about there. Okay, so I could go the other way, copy this over here, just about. So I was, yep, just about there. So that would be accurate. So this point here could connect to that point up there, and I don't have to always just make a measurement from the outside edge. Okay, so that's why we've got that center line. We want to measure relative distances as well from that center line. Let's try that with the hair up here. So I've got this spacing, which is this far away. So I'm going to make a guess. Okay, so we're going to say right about here, I think. Okay, so if I make 2, like that, and now I could move that over. Let's see, a little bit too far. Okay, I could make the note here by drawing over it, or I could just visually estimate, okay, it was like another thickness of that line to the left. Put it back and adjust to here. Erase out. Oops, let's darken that back in just a little. Okay, and then I probably want to double check. Yeah, that's accurate. Okay, so this point here now is one that I'm going to draw a line to. Okay, is that all of them? Well, not this corner, but obviously got that. Okay, so that should be all of them. All right, so I'm going to turn down the opacity of this layer and then just connect the dots on a new layer. So let's just keep using this. So all of these lines now should be reliable enough that I can make new measurements from them. I'll show you what that means in just a moment. I want to keep holding shift like that. Oh, that was a little far. There. Okay. So I'll turn this one back up just a little bit. I don't want it to be too low. There we go. And I think I'll also erase on this previous one all the little marks that I made because I don't want it to mess up my perception of this side. We'll get rid of that as well. Okay. Guys with me so far?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kinda? Is there anything I could clarify before I do the next stage?
I was remembering a lesson from my old class about negative spacing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And this is reminding me of that, so
If anybody's not familiar, it's saying that this space here is as important as this space here that's filled by the guy. And that's pretty true, because the difference between not the shape that you're talking about and the shape you're talking about can sometimes be a bit fiddly, because here we've got like his neck shape there, but now, okay, where does his neck shape end and his face shape begin? Up here. Also, this space is a part of the figure, but it's not a part of the man's flesh. It's a part of the neckerchief shape. Ultimately, you can break down just about anything into these shapes, and comparing their size, their positioning, is a great way to maintain your proportions. So looking at the crook in an arm is just as important as looking at the arm itself. Okay? So let's break down this basic envelope into a slightly more accurate one, and I'll stop there because I think the article and the page explains enough from that point forward. You just do it over and over. I'll use a green color for this one. So what we're going to do is try to get this bit, this part. So sometimes I'll do this where I like draw straight through to find that point. What else should we do? We'll do here, 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 there, there, that. Any other really important ones? Up in the hair, it's like not, well, okay, this one. That one probably is. Up in the hair, like this is not important enough, maybe. I mean, we could put it in at this stage. That one and that one, I guess. It'd be about this much, okay? Some of those lines I just made start to cut into the figure. That's actually fine, okay? Once we have the line, it doesn't have to touch the outside only. I mean, look where we'd be stuck if I did that. It just has to accurately go from a point to another point. So let me erase up in this hair space. In fact, this forehead might be a good example space. Let's just break this line, which is what I'm starting with, up into the more complicated version of it, okay? So I know I'm going to want a line that ends up probably right here by this eyebrow contact. So we'll put a little dash there. And right here where it appears to touch the hair, we'll say we want that as well. So we're going to break this up. The lines can go through the figure because we can then move them to the outside or to the inside depending on what we need. Right now, we've kind of enclosed the whole thing. So every line is going to go from the outside moving towards the inside, unless it's going to stay right where it is. Okay? But there's no reason why we couldn't do the opposite and have it go here and then move a little bit to the outside, or here and then move a little bit to the outside. Either one is fine, and in this method they're almost identical. You just have to be able to see the difference yourself. Okay? So on our original figure here, we're going to try to identify a spot, that spot, and I'm going to say here, here, and let's go for there as well. So all these little green dashes are the points that I want to represent over here on my drawing. Okay? So we can use some of our ruler-based measurement like this. Boy, that color's kind of bad for that on the gray, isn't it? Okay, let me change the color just a little. Make it a little darker. There, we can see it a bit better. Okay, so we can use our ruler-based method like this, but look what's right nearby. Right? We've got this point right nearby. So let's try to make our estimates. Let's say that that is the distance we're trying to estimate. Is it there? Yeah, that was just about right on. So visually, I estimated that's how far down it is. And now how far in is it? Okay, right about, let's say here. Okay, so I'm going to put my little mark there. And if you had a drawing tool, you could just check, but I'm going to check this way. Okay, so that, oh, you know what? That was inaccurate. You guys know why that was inaccurate?
Your line went past the red line.
Exactly. So we got to cut this off if I'm going to use that method, or put a little dash here, right? So now we can check. But that's a good example of what can go wrong. That looks about it. So I think I've got that point here. So let's be a little bit careful and erase out the part that I don't need. But I use some relative distances, right, to get that point accurately laid in. How accurate? Well, you know, close enough that when I zoom in this close, it's not going to be an issue. We've got one more, though, just below that, which actually is touching the line. So let's try to get that. I think it's about here. Okay, and then we're going to check. Oh, I was too high. Too high by a line width and a little bit more. Okay, so I'll try to move it down. Here's a line width and a little bit more. Okay, double check. Bingo. Okay, and for that one, all I need is the horizontal line because it touches the blue. So I don't have to worry about anything else. Okay, we'll get rid of those. So those are two of my points. Let's go up here. So same thing, ruler line. And if you know that you're going to have to use a bunch of ruler lines, then you can just do them all at once. But for that one, I could either estimate distance along this diagonal, which would probably be good, or I could find the position on the red and come over, or I could just use a ruler line. So some of them you can. For that one, I'm just going to use the ruler line and say, there it is, easy. But we should use our estimation for other ones. So let's try to find this point, right? Now this one's a lot harder. It's not right in the middle of this diagonal, but it's close to it, okay? So if this, I would say, is right in the middle, if this thing was heading off toward the corner, it's like almost just a little higher than the corner. So let's try right here, I think. Okay, going down like that. I'm going to take that whole thing, see if I get it. Oh, my previous point says no. See, I needed that previous point for reference. It says that it's about 1.5 line widths above that. If I didn't have that point, then I wouldn't have been able to make that estimation. Right about there, it's saying. So now, erase all that out. We need to find the actual point, okay, which is just a small space. I think I stopped already where I needed to. I'm thinking it's there. So let's take that whole corner. Okay, so all the points should line up. That's about as accurate as I could hope for. Okay, so we'll say that's fine. Okay. Can you imagine working this way all the time for every drawing you ever did? It would be torture, right? You don't want to do this for like every single drawing. This is just to train you, right? To get your eye accustomed to making visual estimations, correcting them, for making measurements carefully that you can then rely upon, because you need to be able to do that. So let's try it. We'll do one more estimation. We'll try that one right there. Okay, so right about here. Okay, so I do need some frame of reference, so I'll put in this corner right there. Drag it over. Ooh, close. Okay, I'm like one line width off every time. So one line width down from there, and I will be okay. I also like to, once I make the correction, oftentimes I won't just say, yeah, that's probably right. I'll do it one more time just to verify. Okay, the whole measure twice, cut once kind of mentality. Okay, and if you're not familiar with that phrase, then I'm so sorry. You need to take wood shop in high school or something. Okay, just to the side of this line here, right? Just right there. That's what I'm trying to estimate. Oop, which tool do I have? Oh, did I get rid of my no, I'm good. Okay, so I'm trying to get this point. So right here, that's the frame of reference that I'm looking to compare. So I'm going to go right here, I think. That looked about the same. Let's see. It looks about the same. All right, let's find out. Yeah, got it that time. Okay. All right, so now I would just connect the dots. And for this one, once you get past these first few, if you want to start freehanding your straight lines, I would encourage you to do that if you've got a steady enough hand to do it. Okay? Drawing straight lines is a big part of all art, right? Whether it be perspective in architecture or freehand sketching. You need to be confident in the lines that you make. If you're not, then maybe don't attempt this just yet. Okay. But I'm going to erase out that part because I know I'm drawing from here to here. Do a couple practices and then try to hit the line. Ooh. And I'll know when I got it right because I can see whether or not the line is straight. If you do start freehanding the lines earlier, remember that those lines are going to dip sometimes or bulge sometimes or wobble sometimes, so they're less reliable measurements. Okay? The most reliable ones will be done with a ruler or a straight tool. But if you're far enough into your process, then you don't have to keep using those very, very harsh tools. Okay? I'll lay that in here. based on what I saw of this guy's face, I'm not going to go a whole lot farther than that detail I just put in, but it would be helpful to note that I was going inside of his skull for some of those. There, here. So some of those, like this one, has to come out from that point. Oh, I don't know why I drew that one. That wasn't the one. It was supposed to be here. Oh, no, there were two. I'm wrong again. Like that. Okay? So it would be helpful to know that I went inside of his skin a little bit on a couple of these if I'm going to take my drawing that far. In this case, that's close enough, right? But if we were going to go there, then we would have a new point here that we would want to connect, and a new point here that we would want to connect, etc. Okay? But we don't have to do that much detail. You can see how far I'm zooming in to get that level of detail. For this particular figure, that's more than enough detail for his forehead. Okay, we can move on to other things. Does all that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions, anxieties, full-blown panic attacks?
I have a question.
Yes.
So how do you gauge how long to make the guiding lines? Like, how can you just, like, eyeball them?
I don't have an answer for that that's going to make any sense. I know. It's like, that's my answer is I know. Okay, so if I have a line over here that's this long, and I want to make exactly that line but at a completely different angle, like over here, I just look at them and go, this is too short. How do I know? I don't know. I've looked at things a lot, I guess. But if I rotate that, it is too short.
Okay.
I just looked at things enough that I started to be able to tell things like that really reliably, right?
So I just, like, I guess I should just keep kind of doing it until it looks right?
Well, no. This exercise is about verifying for sure, right? So what you're going to do is make a guess and try to make your guess correct, right? So you're trying to place, for instance, this point on this line at this angle, right? But then you're going to measure and make sure, right? You're going to use straight edges like that, or you're going to make a comparative measurement like this one, and then grab it and actually move it over there and check how far away something is. Because your guess is important for how close you're already getting, but the exercise is about checking and double checking everything until it is right. Okay?
Okay.
So this is essentially for building that very muscle that you would need to do this kind of thing that I just demonstrated.
Oh, okay.
Right?
All right.
This is like the muscle memory for that, to say, here I drew two lines, they look the same, but oh no, they're not the same at all. And then over and over and again, you'll note that and say, like, if initially you thought these were the same line, and you find out it's too long, and then you get a little bit closer and it's too long, you get a little bit closer, it's too long, you get a little bit closer, eventually you're going to get to a point where it's like, did I get it? Did I nail it? Let's see. Oh, I mean, if I rotate it, did I? Right? But at some point it's going to start to feel right. How much accuracy do we really need in free design and drawing? Not this much, right? We don't need that much, but it will be nice to have that much. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes perfect sense. You
Okay.
explained it to me.
Excellent. I did it. I'm going to make him smile. Or maybe just give him a cool mustache. I don't know who this guy is. I thought he was Dolly, but he's not Dolly. Okay. Other questions? Thought I heard a second person.
Do we have to use the same photo?
You have to use one of the photos in the reference folder where there are casts. In fact, your assignment is to do two of these, not just one. So here on Google Drive, we've got a casts folder, and I've specifically chosen these ones because they'll all work. Him, Julius Caesar, Portrait of an Old Lady, Lincoln, Agrippa. I don't know who Agrippa is, but I love his face. This one, which I know is a very old Roman patrician. This one. This one, which is just a detail, but it's got lots of good detail. Okay. Some of these are harder. Some of these are easier. The one I chose as an example is a bit harder because there's lots of gray tones. This would be a lot easier. This one would be difficult because it's indistinct detail. You've got to choose what is something that you're going to treat as detail, what are you going to ignore. Okay. This one's got pretty good shadows, missing eyes for some reason, don't know why. This one I feel is a really strong one, even though it's got a lot of detail. You can see it all very clearly. This has lots of detail, but you'd have to pick and choose. This one's pretty clear. This one's probably an easier one. Okay, so you pick one of those, and also do a full figure. The full figure is completely up to you. Okay.
Okay.
We look at the assignment real quick just to make sure that all that's actually written there. Go right there. Yeah, one complete figure, full figure, one drawing from the cast in Google Drive. Okay? So 2 of these. So for the last assignment, how many drawings did I have you guys do of like a bean? 20, okay? So hopefully this represents a difference in the amount of quality, right? You only have to do 2 of these because it's very, very taxing to do this. I wouldn't be surprised if you don't do it in one setting, right? If you're going to work for more than an hour, 2 hours or something like that, you can probably do it. Even my example took me 2 different sittings to complete. Okay, so that would be this one shown here. I think I got through all of these stages for sure, and then probably all these stages in the second sitting. Okay, so pace yourself. Any other questions? Okay.
So we would do the shapes of the shadows, and then we would measure from the shadows to our second drawing, right?
Yeah, so let's figure something out over here. Let's say what are some shadow shapes. So for this eye, something like this for sure is a shape I see. And then it comes up here and down. In fact, I should just freehand draw it just because it's easier. Like that. It's something like that. It's pretty complicated when you get right down to it. You can start from a simpler shadow shape and then chisel into it, but that would be like the final shadow shape for that little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what I could do, if I was going to follow the same procedure, is like grab this point before it turns up, this one, and maybe like that one, and just connect those. Boom, 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 and then make it a more complicated shape as I go, which is what I would recommend. So same thing like down here for the nose. We could say that this, that, somewhere down here, and then it actually goes all the way down here. Would be like a good starting place. And like you can see detail in there, but you have to decide, is it light or is it dark, because you've only got that choice. And a exposure layer like this can help. You can just clamp everything. In fact, there's more than one thing that we could do. We could also, I think on this layer itself, mess with these blend if gray options. So let's see. Yeah, it starts to posterize it like that. So let's move this up. No, I don't want to move that up. I just wanted to move that one down. To where some of that starts to disappear, and it can make it more clear what those shapes are that we're going to treat as shadow. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it. Okay? Yeah, so be careful when you pick the cast, because some of them are going to be complicated. Like I would definitely be ignoring all this little clay detail here. I want the fewest number of shapes I can get away with. Right? Very, very few. For an example, just look at what I did here is almost treat the entire right-hand side of the body as one big dark shape, with just a couple of exceptions, like here on the abdomen, here on the pecs, and one little detail on the shoulder, and that's it. If you guys want an artist who does this, Mike Mignola, who did Hellboy, is kind of a master of this kind of illustration. Yeah, there we go. Mike Mignola. So all of it is either color or black, right? And it takes a lot of discipline to kind of correctly pull out those shapes.
I love that comic.
Yeah, and I love that style, and it is real hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Never
but
seen the comic.
here we go.
Specifically.
This is almost exactly like what I was drawing in pencil. I guess it's not gonna sharpen up in the preview, but yeah, here's another one. So you can see he's penciling it in just like I'm doing the Bargue drawing right now, drawing the shadow shape and just treating it all as one big shape. Yeah. Really great comic, really great artist.
Yeah, man, movie.
Oh yeah, several. All right, any other questions about how to do this, why we're doing it, etc.? Then that will be the end of the lecture.